You'll give me 5 strong sons and never struggle again. The giant cowboy promised. The barefoot girl stood alone, where the prairie seemed to stretch into forever, the sky wide and pale above her. Dust clung to her feet, cracked by long walks and longer days, and the hem of her simple dress fluttered in the dry wind. She had learned early that waiting for kindness was useless. Hunger had been her closest companion, and silence her shelter. The land had taken everything her family once had, leaving her with nothing but endurance and the will to keep moving. She was counting her steps when the sound of hooves broke the stillness. A single rider emerged from the haze, slow and steady, as if the earth itself carried him forward. He was enormous, not just in height but in presence. Shoulders broad beneath a weathered coat, his posture unshaken by miles of hard riding. His horse was calm, powerful and obedient, mirroring the man who guided it. When he stopped in front of her, the ground seemed to settle. He studied her quietly, taking in her bare feet, her tired eyes, and the way she stood straight despite everything. There was no judgment in his gaze, only recognition. "This land is cruel to those who walk it alone," he said at last, his voice deep and even. "I've seen too many broken by it." She said nothing. Words had never saved her before. "I don't make promises lightly," he continued, dismounting. "I build what lasts, strength, family, a future that doesn't bow to hunger." The wind tugged at her hair as she finally looked up at him. She had heard fine words before, spoken by men who vanished with the sunrise. Yet this one did not rush. He waited, patient as stone. "Stand with me," he said, quieter now. "You'll give me a strong home, and I'll give you a life where struggle no longer owns you. Strong sons, raised to respect the land and the people on it. A name that means something." Her heart beat hard. The promise sounded too large, too certain. She searched his face for deceit and found none. Only resolve, carved by sun and storms. "I don't need obedience," he added. "I need courage. The kind that keeps walking barefoot when the world offers no road." Something shifted inside her then. Not hope, not yet, but the memory of it. She nodded once, small but sure. The giant cowboy smiled, just barely, as if he had been waiting for that moment longer than he cared to admit. He offered his hand, rough and steady. When she placed her hand in his, the prairie seemed less empty. The dust still clung to her feet. The sky still stretched endlessly ahead, but for the first time, the path forward felt chosen, not forced. Life on the giant cowboy's ranch began, before the sun rose and ended long, after it dipped behind the hills. The barefoot girl quickly learned that promises did not erase hardship. They gave it meaning. The land tested her every day. Her hands blistered from hauling water. Her shoulders ached from lifting feed sacks, and the cold nights crept into her bones. Yet she never asked to stop. Each task completed felt like a quiet victory over the life that once tried to break her. The cowboy watched her without hovering. He believed strength grew best when trusted. When she stumbled, she stood again on her own. When she failed, she learned. Slowly, the ranch responded to her presence. The animals grew calmer under her care, the house warmer with her steady routines, and even the silence between her and the cowboy softened into understanding. Not everyone approved. Nearby ranchers noticed the change and whispered among themselves. They spoke of her origins, her lack of shoes, her quiet ways. Some claimed she would bring weakness to a place that survived on toughness. Trouble followed their words. One morning, a section of fence lay broken. Another day, cattle wandered off in the night. Suspicion circled her like vultures. When confronted, the giant cowboy stood tall before them all. His voice did not rise, but it carried. "This land doesn't reward cruelty," he said. "It rewards those who endure." Winter arrived early that year, harsher than expected. Snow buried the plains, cutting supply routes and forcing families into isolation. While others panicked, the girl planned. She counted stores, rationed carefully, and tended the sick animals with quiet determination. She stayed awake through freezing nights, feeding fires and whispering calm into frightened horses. The cowboy saw then what others could not. Her strength was not loud. It did not boast. It survived. When the storm finally broke, neighboring ranches came seeking help, food, shelter, guidance. The Same people who doubted her now followed her lead without question. She offered what she could, not out of pride, but because she remembered hunger too well to turn it away. As the snow melted, so did the doubts. One evening, as the sky burned gold and red, the cowboy stood beside her, watching the land breathe again. "You didn't just survive this place," he said. "You changed it." She looked out across the ranch, her heart steady. The promise was no longer a distant future. It was taking shape in every step she took, every choice she made, written quietly into the soil beneath her feet. Years moved across the ranch like slow clouds, changing the land and the people who worked it. The barefoot girl was barefoot no longer, yet she kept her steps humble, grounded in the memory of where she had begun. The ranch had grown wider and stronger, its fences straight, its fields alive with motion. What once felt like survival now felt like purpose. Children's voices filled the mornings, rising with the sun. They learned early the weight of responsibility, the value of effort, and the meaning of standing together. The giant cowboy taught them discipline, patience, and respect for the land. He did not raise them with harshness, but with example, showing them that true strength was steady and controlled, never wasted. She watched it all with quiet pride. The struggles had not vanished completely. Drought returned in cycles, and markets shifted, testing even the strongest plans. But the difference was clear. They faced each challenge together, not as victims of the land, but as partners to it. When crops failed, they adapted. When storms damaged buildings, they rebuilt. Each setback strengthened the foundation they had laid. Word of their ranch traveled far beyond the plains. Travelers spoke of a place where fairness ruled, where hunger was answered with food and effort with opportunity. People came seeking work, guidance, and sometimes forgiveness for past mistakes. She welcomed them carefully, believing that trust, once earned, could change lives. One evening, as the sky faded into deep amber, the giant cowboy stood beside her on the porch. Time had etched lines into his face, but his presence remained solid, unshaken. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. She smiled softly. "I remember the dust on my feet more than anything." He nodded. "I promised you a life without struggle." She looked out over the ranch, where lights glowed warmly against the darkening land. "You didn't remove the struggle," she said. "You gave it meaning." He exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he had carried for years. The promise he once spoke had grown into something deeper than words. It lived in the land, in the people, in the future they had built together. As night settled over the prairie, the wind carried the sound of life thriving rather than merely surviving. Their story became one told quietly, not as legend, but as truth. A reminder that strength was not born from dominance, but from commitment, endurance, and keeping one's word under endless skies.